Imagine walking through a garden where every plant, every stone, every path holds a piece of you. In this video, learn how to craft a garden that's not just beautiful, it's personal. This time, it's personal. Starting off, what's going to be really important is to define your story in the first place. So that is going to require a certain amount of reflection. May I suggest you siphon off a little bit of time and think about the moments that define you, that might warrant inclusion. Think also about any cultural influences that are important to you, family traditions. I don't know, if you've got some Scottish ancestry or something, then maybe you want to be included. Whatever it is, all those little things that you feel make up who you are, just brainstorm them and then start to get a sense of what you do want to include. Moving on, we will then worry about how we might include those specific aspects. There's no getting away from the fact that symbolism is going to be really important in helping you to tell your story in your garden. One of the major symbols, I think, in a garden is a pathway. Actually, this is an archetype. It's a symbol that crosses over different cultures, but a pathway will represent a journey. So you might want to, depending on what your life story is and your perspective on your life journey, perhaps that is a weaving path, or maybe it's just a straight path. But probably at some point you will have some curves in there as you weave your way through life. If you're weaving a pathway through the garden, representing your life, then you may want to think about creating different rooms within the garden, probably because you've got different chapters in your life, or at the very least you're going to feel like you have different facets of your personality that you want to express. What kind of symbols then might you use within the garden? Specific plants you would definitely want to include, perhaps native plants if you want to represent where you're from, but equally if travel is important to you, then you may want to include plants that come from places that are significant to you, maybe Mediterranean, whatever it is, it could be anything. But then also you have plants that are, again, culturally symbols of certain things. So for example, roses commonly express love. You might have succulents to express resilience. You might want to plant a larger tree or make use of a larger tree if you've already got an existing one in your garden. Maybe you want to make that a symbol of endurance. You know, obviously you put your mind to what you want the symbols to be within your garden. And also bear in mind, other people don't necessarily have to understand your garden. In this process, you would be telling the story mainly for yourself. Unless, for example, you're a famous person or something and you're expected to open the garden to visitors, but that's probably hardly ever going to really be the case. You could make use of stepping stones to represent certain milestones in your life. Also, a bridge is a really good symbol to pass from one stage to another. I'm thinking here of the Terrence Higgins Trust garden at Chelsea last year in 2024, which was designed by Matthew Chalza. He made use of the old tombstone from the government warning ads. Used to be a symbol of terror, really, I think, back in 1985 when AIDS and HIV virus were rife. The designer dropped that tombstone to create a bridge into a more hopeful, optimistic future, a more optimistic space. So you could also potentially make use of a bridge if that fits your story. So how might you personalize the garden? You can make use of a sculpture if you like that kind of thing. I'm very fussy about sculptures. You may or may not be, but there is an option there if you see something, sculpture or artwork, that speaks to you, then of course that's an option to include it. Plaques, particularly if you have, say, a tree that might be planted in memory of a loved one, or maybe art. If the art is durable and is going to withstand being outdoors, then you could, again, bring that into. I mean, I really find artists' gardens generally really interesting because they do bring their art out into the garden, and not only does it make it unique, but it's very good for crafting a story, I suppose, and bringing extra meaning to a garden. So not just surface level, but might be something that challenges you or makes you think. Heirlooms as well, if you have any family heirlooms, pots or tools or something, again, would need to be something durable. But these are all things that you could think about including. I think in any garden design, you need to think about what feeling you want to evoke. How do you want to feel when you are in the garden? And again, that might be different for the different rooms in your garden. In fact, it probably will be, otherwise there's no point in making rooms in the first place. So if you've split off areas into different rooms to represent different chapters in your life, then how do you want to evoke the feelings of each chapter? Colour is going to be an important one. And I think the feeling you're trying to evoke will quite often determine what colour scheme you're going to use. Obviously pastels would be more soothing, gentle period, being a bit cliched here, but might represent like a late stage in life. Or if you want to represent a romance, maybe you go for something really hot. You go for hot colours like red, oranges, yellow. I'm just chucking ideas out here. If there's been a period of your life where there's been a lot of movement or a lot of growth, then how about using grasses or something which obviously are going to move in the wind? You're going to get a lot of movement with them. Or you might do a really vigorous growing vine or something to represent growth if you've had an intensive period of growth. Equally, if you want to represent tranquility, then you might go for water, or if you want a sense of flow, something to represent the creative process or so on, then water could be useful for that. So I think it's about really defining your story, what is important to you, and then secondarily, how do you represent that within the garden? Also, it would be quite good to kind of future-proof your garden. Let's assume that you're not right at the end of your journey and that you are going to perhaps want to include something else. It's a bit tricky to leave whole areas of your garden untouched in terms of leaving space, but then maybe think about how you might want to add to your story as it develops. And again, this may be in connection with how far through your life story you are, but something to think about. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, then you may get something out of watching the piece I did on a sense of place, because these two kind of go hand in hand. So I will link to that video here. And if not, then see you in the next video. Take care, plant fans. Keep growing, keep creating.